Hey guys, it's Sohee here. I want to cover the topic of troubleshooting your fat loss program. I had a reader earlier in the week ask me what to do when you are seemingly adhering to your fat loss program to a T and you're not seeing the results or the progress that you think you should be seeing. So in today's video, I want to cover 3 main variables you should take into account. Now, this is of course barring any health complications there may be in place that may contraindicate your being on a fat loss program. For example, if you have a history of crash dieting, maybe you have crash dieted for 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, and the norm is for you to be on extremely low calories for extended periods of time, paired with months of binge eating. So you're a yo-yo dieter, you cut your calories to the extreme, and then they spike for a while and you're back and forth. I think if that is happening, then maybe fat loss is not the best idea for you. As well, if you have any medical conditions, if you have, and maybe if you are still in recovery from an eating disorder, then fat loss may be not the most appropriate goal for you right now. So again, this is barring any health complications, assuming you are relatively healthy as an individual. You've got no reason to not be on that fat loss program. So we'll cover the 3 variables next. All right, so the first variable to consider is, are you actually in a caloric deficit? In order to lose body fat, you need to be in a deficit. One way that you may be not in the deficit that you think you are is if your target calories are simply set too high. Now, for most individuals, so I like to use the body weight multiplier when it comes to determining how high or how low a calorie intake is for an individual, and that is the total number of calories divided by your total body weight in pounds. So generally, the fat loss body weight multiplier for most people would be between 10 to 12 times body weight in pounds. In other words, if, for example, we have, just for simplicity's sake, an individual who weighs 100 pounds, then her dieting calories may be set at, so times 12 would be 1,200 calories. Now, this will vary, of course, by individual. So over the years, I've actually modified the range. I think that the range is higher than we maybe once previously believed. I've had people dieting on 14 times body weight calories and still making fat loss progress then. I've also had, especially for the more with individuals with much higher body fat to lose, maybe they fall into the obese category. They can start off on the lower end, the 10 times body weight, sometimes even 9, as low as 8 times body weight calories. But sometimes it's simply the case that the calories you set for yourself is actually not putting you in a deficit. Maybe you're actually more at maintenance calories, or maybe even a slight surplus. And the best way so really it comes down to a guessing game. When I have, for example, when I have a new client come to me and I read through their questionnaire, I have a very comprehensive questionnaire, ask about their age, ask about their dietary history, health history, activity level, what they do for their workout, and any other health complications that may come into play. Look at their progress pictures, look at if they have an eating disorder history, that's all helpful to know too. And then also, how active are you at your job? And then I take all of that into account to make what is my best guess at setting a prescribed macronutrient intake, number of grams of protein, carbs, and fats for them, which most of us know that will automatically add up to a certain caloric intake. Protein has 1 calorie per gram, carb has 1 calorie per gram, and fat has 9 calories per gram, so you can just add that up, do the math. And then from there, I will, depending on, every 2 weeks they submit a check-in, depending on their progress, depending on their adherence and their feedback, I will then adjust their numbers, their macronutrient numbers accordingly on an as-needed basis. So maybe if you are not working with a coach, or if you're trying to do things on your own, it's really important to be honest with yourself and ask, am I really in a deficit, or am I just kind of not being super good about tracking and setting my target calories too high and just hoping for the best? The other way that you may not be in a deficit is if, let's say, you are tracking your intake. Maybe you are weighing your food on on a food scale for the most part. You are plugging everything into a macronutrient calculator, nutrition app. But let's say the past month or so you've had more social engagements than usual, and you've been going out to eat more, out at restaurants, out at bars, out at baby showers, etc. And you're served food a lot of times where you have to estimate the nutrition information, you have to eyeball portion sizes, which every now and then is fine. But when you are on a fat loss regimen, the more you estimate, the more off track you get. Right, so maybe let's say you estimate one meal, you're off by 80 calories, which is fine. But that by itself in isolation is not going to hurt you too much. But you add that up, you take meal out after meal out after meal out, all of a sudden, maybe in one day you're off by 200-300 calories. You're eating that many more calories than you actually thought. And you're tracking everything technically, but because you are not being super accurate with every meal, you are becoming more and more inaccurate with your actual intake. So maybe you think you are in a calorie deficit, maybe you think you're following your program, but if you're really brutally honest with yourself, you will see that you're not tracking as accurately as you think you are. And so for someone like me, for example, I am 5'2", 108 pounds. For me, my dieting calories would be way lower than for someone who's, 6'4", male, 240 plus pounds. His dieting calories would be way higher than me. He has a lot more wiggle room to drop calories, to eyeball and be okay. Whereas for me, maybe the difference of even 150, 200 calories per day extra that I don't account for, that could mean the difference for me between seeing the fat loss results that I want versus making no progress at all. Okay, so when you're on a fat loss regimen, I really strongly recommend trying to minimize the occasions you eat out as much as possible, especially if you're petite, and especially if you are preparing for a show, like a bikini show, figure show, or you've got some important event coming up that you need to be ready for. If you're on a strict timeline, then you have to be making more social sacrifices than usual to get to where you want to be. The next variable is a mistake that I see a lot of people making, which is not properly gauging progress. So I know that we all like to use scale weight as an indicator of progress, and I do agree that it is very important to tell you how you're doing, but I think that taking scale weight in isolation and not taking into account all the other factors that come into progress, I think that's very myopic and can get you into a lot of trouble, because scale weight can be very misleading. It's fickle, does not measure just fat loss or fat gain. In fact, there's water, sodium, stress. There's time of month, bloating, and then you also have, if you're gaining muscle, guess what? That translates to an increase in scale weight. Just because the scale weight is increasing does not mean you're getting body fat per se. What if your body comp is actually visibly improving in the mirror, but scale weight's going up? Do you say that you have regressed in progress? No. So you also have to take into account body circumference measurements, progress pictures, the fit of your clothes. I also like to say that comments that friends, family, coworkers make about your physique, especially if they're unsolicited comments like, hey, you look like you're leaning out, you look slimmer, are you dieting? That's a really good sign, because if others are noticing your progress, then you are definitely getting somewhere good. So don't discount their feedback. At the same time, when it comes to gauging progress, you have to be as objective as possible about your nutrition adherence. If you can have the most perfect fat loss program in the world, but it's not going to mean anything if you are not consistently adhering to the program. So for me, when I work with clients, I prescribe a recommended macronutrient intake, and I say, okay, on plan means you're within plus or minus 5 grams of each prescribed macronutrient number. If you are within 5 of each range, then you are considered to be on plan for that day. Otherwise, you are a little bit off, or you're completely off for the day. And we take into account how many days on point were you of the past 14 days. If you're 13 out of 14, that's usually pretty good. And then you take everything into context. As well, you also have to take into account, are you, if you're a woman, is it the time of month for you? Or maybe if it's, ant flow is around the corner, then maybe you're holding on to more water weight than usual. Then if you know that, then you know not to put too much stock in scale weight. So don't rely solely on scale weight to gauge progress. I think it's a really good idea to invest in a tape measure. I like a flexible tape measure. I recommend the Myo tape to my clients. And I have them measure multiple spots throughout their body, but especially recommend a waist measurement and then also your hip measurement at least once every 2 weeks. And if that number, so for example, if your dietary adherence is on point, you're feeling good, and let's say you check in a month from now, and your waist measurement has decreased by 1 inch, but scale weight is the same, that does not mean you've made no progress. In fact, that's a really good thing. Scale weight will respond in kind over time, but body circumference measurements tend to be a lot more telling in terms of how you're progressing on your fat loss regimen. The last variable that I think a lot of people overlook is your training program intensity and progressive overload. Now, for those of you who follow me know that I am a huge proponent of strength training for men and women alike, and especially of the heavy variety. We do a mix of high reps, low reps, especially with the big compound movements, squat, bench, deadlift variations, hip thrust variations. Then we also throw in some accessory work at the end, lat pull downs, different row variations, push-ups, high step-ups, reverse lunges, all that good stuff. Now, if you're working with me and any of my recommended coaches, you know that in order to see the positive body comp changes that you're looking for most people that will mean decrease in body fat with perhaps a simultaneous increase in muscle mass. In order for that to happen, you need to be striving to get stronger in the gym from week to week. Now, in order to do that, it's really important to be actually tracking your workouts. So I like to have my clients on 4-week programs. That way they are given ample opportunity to get stronger at a given exercise in a given set and rep range. And every week they track their numbers, they try to get an extra rep, they try to add more weight, or maybe they just do the same weight, same reps with improved form. That's still considered a form of progressive overload. If you are getting stronger, that can then translate to increased muscle mass, which then translates to improved body composition. This goes for women as well. I know that when women say they want to tone, they think that they just need to lose a bunch of body fat, lose a bunch of scale weight, and they'll look the way they want to look. What many don't realize is that in order to get the toned look, you actually need to have some muscle. Otherwise, you just end up being a smaller, flabbier version of your former self. Having some muscle will help you look lean, actually will give you your body curves that you want. And actually you will look really feminine and athletic. I've been weight training for over 8 years. I'm still, by normal standards, considered relatively petite, 5'2", 108. I've been told numerous times, and I don't fault them for this, been told numerous times that when I'm in street clothes, walking down the street, I just look like some regular, petite, skinny Asian chick who doesn't even lift. And, I guess I could be offended by that, but I take that to mean, hey, look, I can lift heavy for 8+ years, and because I'm managing my nutrition and because I'm smart about my caloric intake, that does not translate into looking bulky, looking thick, and which is what a lot of women are afraid of. So, women and men, if you are on a fat loss regimen, if you are on a strength training regimen, if you are on a mass gaining regimen, regardless of your goal, you should be chasing strength in the gym. And I wrote a few articles recently that I can link to in the video below discussing the optimal rest periods. So Brad Schoenfeld actually came out with a recent study just a few months ago showing that 3 minutes of rest versus 1 minute of rest was superior between working sets for squat and bench for both strength and hypertrophy. So I know it was traditionally believed that more 60 to 90 second rest period was better for hypertrophy, but we're now finding out that that's not the case. So there's that. And so again, chasing strength, if you are kind of just going through the motion with your weights, in the gym and you feel like you're looking the same day after day, or maybe you are losing scale weight and but your measurements really aren't changing, that probably means that you're maybe losing more muscle mass than you think you are. You want to at least be maintaining your muscle mass, perhaps even putting on a little bit when you're on a fat loss program. And the way to do that is to approach your training sessions with intensity. So set PRs, take your sessions seriously, track your workouts, and make sure you are progressing in that regard. So it's not just nutrition adherence, it's also training intensity, progressive overload, and then last one is the are you properly gauging progress? So make sure you take those 3 factors into account. Be objective, be as objective as possible with yourself. And if you have a coach, that's what they're for. They can tell you, listen, I know you think you've been on point, but if you take a look at your dietary adherence, you haven't been on point. Or listen, I know you've been doing everything else right, but your training program, we looked at your past month's workouts, you're doing the same weights every single session and for the same reps. That's got to change. Let's push the intensity, which will in turn yield positive body composition results. All right, so take those 3 variables into account when troubleshooting your fat loss program, and I can promise you can find at least one thing you can improve to get better results.